Hello, I welcome all of you who has joined us. This is the Media Center Ukraine, which is going on with its work. This is the 211th day of the heroic resistance of Ukraine and Ukrainian people. I thank all the journalists who are speaking truth about this war. Now I'd like to introduce our speaker. This is Fedir Venislavskyi, the representative of the President of Ukraine to Verkhovna Rada, Parliament of Ukraine. We will be speaking about the topic which is today so important for our society. We have all observed how yesterday the Russian Federation announced partial mobilization. What does it mean for us? Which could be the consequences? Hello, dear journalists and dear viewers. As of yesterday's decisions of the president of the occupier country, aggressor country, the Russian Federation, for us and personally for me, it was not a surprise at all. As though they had to do this step, I already mentioned to my colleagues about that, communicating with them in June. I didn't have any doubts that after successful actions of the Ukrainian armed forces, the Russian Federation will have to announce mobilization, either full one or partial one. They don't have any other option, because during all of these times when they conduct this terrorist war against Ukraine, they totally exhausted all the possible resources of the hidden mobilization. Whoever could either materially or ideologically zombied to be involved in the war against Ukraine are already involved. And according to the data of the main Department of Intelligence, the Russian Federation since summer has begun to feel a very acute lack in the staff, in the manning, because of the losses which they had on the territory of Ukraine. After the successful counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine in Slobozhanshchina, in Kharkiv region, when 96% of the territories of Kharkiv region which used to be occupied is liberated, Putin understood the full disastrous consequences which are awaiting for Russian Federation, and to mitigate, to minimize the negative consequences for Russia, and to show some of the achievements in the eyes of his citizens. On the one hand, he announced the partial mobilization. On the other hand, he again, and it was already more than once, he decided to provide nuclear blackmail. He threatened with nuclear weapons and announced that soon another attempt will be done of annexation of part of Ukraine's territory. But not a single announcement of Putin in the modern civilized world is taken seriously. Mobilization, as I'm sure, will go on to lead to the consequences which we could see yesterday in Moscow and other cities. Those are not very courageous, but still they have this protest movement, because this is one thing when you are just lying on your sofa and praising the professional military who are as if at war, some quasi-special operation, but the other thing is when the subpoena is coming to your husband, your brother, your son. This is a totally different situation when they understand the inevitability of the losses among their relatives, and altogether with the response of our Western partners, because the whole civilized world understood that you cannot conduct negotiations with Putin. You cannot have any arguments appealing to his understanding. He is living in his own imaginary world, which is not correlating with reality. So I think that the synergy of the efforts of our Western partners, which will be the further support of Ukraine, and it was already mentioned by lots of Western partners and leaders, and strengthening of sanctions pressure, together with the internal protest, it will be another step to finalize the epoch of Russia, which unfortunately we have as our neighbor. We could hear public announcements that they plan to mobilize 300,000 of Russians, but we understand that those are just public announcements. There is the hidden point, which was not made public. So how do we understand what's the aim of our enemy? How many people they try to mobilize? For any country which has the intentions to occupy the territory of other country, and for it to achieve its aims, it must have one of the two components, or both of them. The unexpected character of the full-scale attack, which was not expected for us as well. But in the scale, how it all started on the 24th of February, even for lots of us, was a big surprise. On the other hand, there should be a very substantial advantage in the numbers of the staff. According to the methodological approaches of the Russian military, and we can see that they are acting according to the World War II templates. There should be the exceeding staff of 3 to 5 times to achieve some of the aims. So, to keep the temporarily occupied territories of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and yesterday's rhetoric is still about the Donetsk and Luhansk regions, about Donbass, and only a bit about Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, to keep those territories and to begin any of the actions, they need to have the armed forces much bigger. Because now approximately 110, 115 battalions are on the territory of Ukraine. So the first aim is to create some opportunity for the further aggressive actions and for the offensive operations. On the other hand, they understand that the power and capacities of our armed forces have substantially increased in comparison with the 24th of February, with the beginning of the war, and our successful counter-offensive actions are leading to the consequences which are totally unacceptable in the world of picture, in the mind of Putin. But answering your question, what we should expect for the number of our armed forces, of our military, and in other components of security and defense sector is more than enough to successfully perform the missions and the tasks appointed by the Commander-in-Chief and the Supreme Commander-in-Chief, so I do not see any risks to expect the negative scenario for the Ukrainians at the Russian front line. Another component of these processes are so-called referendums, which are quickly conducted on the temporarily occupied territories. And we have heard announcements of the leader of the occupier country that they will definitely, in fact, join them with Russia. Which will be the response of the parliament? The parliament, during the plenary session, has already responded. We have begun the work when Putin was speaking. So in the parliament, in Verkhovna Rada, we created the ad hoc working group with the representatives of different MP factions and groups. There was the announcement voted for, where we addressed to the parliaments and the leaders of the world countries, to the international organizations, to respond and to react onto those attempts of the annexations of parts of Ukraine, this blackmail for the whole civilized world, and we adopted this announcement. But I'm the lawyer and I'm the expert in the constitutional law. So I would say that the results of the referendum, of so-called referendum of 2014, the same will happen with any quasi-forms of democracy which they try to provide on the temporarily occupied territories of Ukraine. From the legal point of view, they don't have a single argument which would allow even to have anything close to the legitimacy of these actions. There is no subject which has the right to to implement the right for self-definition. There are no legal substantiation for such a right, and there are no internal Russian legal reasons for that. Because knowing Russian legislation, there is no such subject as part of the population of Kherson region or part of the Zaporizhia region population. They again, I emphasize, is just the sick imagination of those who write scenarios for Russian Federation. It doesn't matter for us at all. No one will acknowledge the results of these pseudo-referendums, that these parts of Ukrainian territory will be included into other states. Ukraine will conduct all the necessary measures until the full deoccupation of the south of Ukraine will take place, as well as Donetsk and Lugansk regions. This is just the propagandist situation which was created for the internal Russian audience, just for their some quasi-understandings, as if those are achievements for the occupier country. It will not have any consequences. Dear colleagues, are there any questions? Please take the mic. Vitaly Holod, Ukrinform. I've got 3 questions. Could I ask one by one, please? Could you please tell Fedir what made Putin to announce the partial mobilization? On the one hand, you said the Kharkiv counteroffensive of the armed forces of Ukraine makes him do something, but maybe something happened in Samarkand where he could promise something and it made him act. I think everybody who was watching this meeting in Samarkand made already conclusions. What was the real role and what's the real place in this regional policy is taken by Russia and Putin, who had to wait for the leaders of the countries, and even from the moral point of view, he was totally not confident, not self-confident. And looking at the announcements of the, in fact, participants of the this organization representatives, I think that this partial mobilization was not connected with any of the promises of Putin in Samarkand. I think it's connected, first of all, with the success of the Ukrainian armed forces, and of course we shouldn't underestimate the enemy's intelligence. Their intelligence forces have lots of agents, so I think that they understand the further steps of our armed forces, which I am sure we will see soon, so not to allow those further active, successful actions, they're trying to counterweigh something. But objectively, mobilization is not a short-term action which can instantly lead to some effect. First of all, to conduct the procedure of mobilization, it needs weeks, not days. Then, for those military, for those to be sent to the military units to coordinate them and to put them to battle, because they were used just like expendables, because they don't know what they will do and what they should do. I don't exclude that. I think it will take place. I don't see any other danger for our country. Another question. Shoigu named 300,000. There was no figure in the decree by Putin. And when the 7th point, if it's not the fake one, there was no figure there. Can it witness that maybe they afraid not to achieve this figure of 300,000? Will they find 300,000? I don't exclude that it could be manipulation. Because in the options which we heard from Putin, those are substantial indicators, and even for multi-million population of Russian Federation, this is the painful moment which makes them think about their future. I think those are manipulations. I don't see any danger for Ukraine because of any figures. Whatever Russia does now, they cannot stop successful actions of the Ukrainian armed forces. And the third question from Ukrinform. Let's imagine the Russians find 300,000. Or maybe Putin did not name the figure, maybe it should be even higher. If they find this number of people, will it be parity in the military positions? What will be our actions then? In comparison with the occupier country, our president and the parliament, in the morning of the 24th February, we acknowledged that this is the full-scale war, and we announced full mobilization in Ukraine, which led to mobilization of 700,000 military and servicemen who are now in the armed forces or any other military formations. This number is more than enough as of today to adequately respond to any threats, including to take into consideration, including the increase of the number of Russian troops. We don't see any necessity of any mirror or symmetrical actions from our side. Fedir, yesterday a very happy and inspiring event took place. Our heroes were liberated and came back home. 215 of them came back home. Could you comment on this event? How was it prepared? How long was this operation going on? Because we understand that this is the colossal work. Yes, you're right. This was the colossal work. And what happened yesterday or this night, I would say that this is the quintessence or the conclusion of the titanic work which is not noticed. I would say that the main intelligence department with other segments of the security and defense sector were working on the comeback of the Azov regiment and other prisoners of war since the moment until the decision was taken that the task of the Azov steel defenders was accomplished and that they were given the opportunity to save their lives, to put down their arms, and for the representatives of our commandment, because when they were disarmed, there were representatives, the high representatives of our main intelligence department, so they, having certain negotiations, came to the conclusions that we need to save as many lives as possible. And instantly after it took place, rather hard and systematic negotiations and talks began with the representatives of the Russian side, with the participants of the foreign intermediaries to get back our defenders as quick as possible. Unfortunately, Russian Federation and even the representatives which were adequately assessing the situation were not always free and could not even stick to their own promises because of the political situation. But in the end of the day, it led to the situation that yesterday we got back 215 servicemen. The vast majority of those are military commanders who were the most valuable for Russian Federation. I think that the exchange fund which we gave away cannot be even compared. We shouldn't even pay attention to it, knowing who came back from Russia. So this is the huge gratitude to the main intelligence department, because I know that there was the whole group of higher officials working on that, including the representatives of the Ministry of Interior and other participants. I thank you, and I hope that we'll be able to bring back all of our heroes who are so far, unfortunately, prisoners of war. I think that you found time to join our air. I'm reminding you we had Fedir Venislavskyi, the representative of the President of Ukraine to Verkhovna Rada, Parliament of Ukraine. Dear colleagues, our next briefing will take place at 1 p.m. We'll be speaking with the Deputy Mayor of Izum about the situation in the deoccupied Izum city. Stay with us. Thank you. Glory to Ukraine.